So now that we're here, we are starting a new series in my class looking at halakha, looking at contemporary issues that the conservative movement is talking about, grappling with, and hoping trying to answer. I'll give you a precursor, which is my next session, which is in 2 weeks, because we'll take Martin Luther King Day off. In 2 weeks, we're going to look at the question that you may have heard about that was recently discussed is electric car. Are you permitted to drive an electric car on Shabbat? So that's what we're going to do in 2 weeks. It's actually really interesting because there are 5 position papers that were written on it that were accepted this earlier in the summer, I think in June, on that question of are electric cars permitted on Shabbat. So I'll give you my preview and come back. We're going to look at a very much less controversial subject for our first one, which is an interesting question, which is how long a sick person should be on the Mishaberach list, when they should come off, and how it should be said. I know, not as crazy controversial or not as difficult a discussion as whether you're allowed to drive a car on Shabbat or drive an electric car on Shabbat. But if you've ever been to our services on a Monday or a Thursday or a Saturday morning, we say a lot of names for sick people. Actually, recently was just a tshuva that was passed that we're going to take a look at 3 months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, which literally discusses how to deal with it. And also, perhaps you are praying for someone that you know is sick, but you may not have asked them if you can pray for them or asked if you can publicly pray for them, right? I mean, right, I read the names of a lot of people. I don't know, I personally don't know if we have their consent to pray for them in public, to say their names Hebrew or English in public. And is that a violation? And what's the efficacy? And here's another question, which is, what if someone has a chronic illness? Are they on the list for 40 years? What about, not a great thing, but I visit many people on their bedside. I visit many people within a few days of their death, the imminent death. Do we pray for healing? Even when the physicians have made the determination that healing is not possible. So that's what we're going to discuss today. Any thoughts, reactions, comments before we sort of open up into the sources on this?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One of my sisters-in-law has a very ill father, and I told her I would pray for him, and she was very grateful. So maybe you should speak to people about it.
Yeah.
Tell them.
Yeah, so ask people and then see what they say. Yeah, Nelson and then Eric.
My very Orthodox son says no one really knows when another person's going to die, even if they are a doctor. And we just can't rely upon that advice.
So at every moment until death, there's potential for healing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Eric and then Jackie.
Okay, I guess this is how I responded to that situation with my mother. This was some years ago now, 4 years ago. But so I basically had, and those days were on Zoom only, so the names are put in the chat every time, and it was every day that time. So while there was a chance of her actually coming out of it, and she actually did come out of it for a few weeks. But when we put her in hospice, I still put her on there, transitioning from please heal to please ease her pain. And if you're going to take her, that kind of thing. At the very, very end, which is when it was like 2 or 3 days, we knew. I still did it, but to ease her pain, that kind of thing.
Right, so that actually begs another question, thanks for sharing, is should there be different types of mishaberach given the circumstance? Right? Because Eric,
Probably
right,
yes.
if I understand correctly, your prayer for healing that you wanted for her changed,
It did. In the last days, it changed. Yes.
even though the prayer that was recited during the service didn't
Yeah.
change.
Yep.
Your
Correct.
your goal, intention, whatever. Yeah. Okay. We'll talk about that. Actually, the tshuva deals with that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take a look at that. Jackie? Yeah.
I'm one of the people that continually reappears, so I'm aware of the fact that it's a repeat. But first of all, before I speak anyone's name aloud, I always clear it with them. And it's interesting because when I ask people if I can pray for them, they are so happy that I would do this.
Mhm.
That
Like Sherry said. Yeah.
it's been appreciated, and that would be wonderful. And in the case of illnesses that they're not like chronic illnesses, but it's like the long COVID, and they're discovering more of that. And we're in a situation like that with my daughter, who she had a trifecta when she was bitten by a tick. And so, and she still has flare-ups where she is in great pain and can't do anything. And then she may have relief. They think they may have found something that helps her. And I pray that she will come back to herself.
Amen.
And then she's disappointed if she's taken off a drug, because then they look at it more carefully and they decide it's not good for long-term use, that it has side effects. So we have this up and down kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it depresses her terribly, and I worry about the depression too.
Well, that's the other question, is about mental and emotional health and illness. And is it the same prayer? Is it a different prayer? And how do you make that determination? All right, Lynn. Oh, you're muted. Unmute.
Hello,
There you go. Oh,
I did, hello, I didn't hear the beginning of this, but I just know when I ask somebody if they want to be on the list, oftentimes people I ask aren't Jewish, because I have, obviously I have friends who aren't Jewish. And they say, if it's allowed, I say, yeah, and they go, it's wonderful, and thank you very much. And they just go from there, and it's like, I always just feel, can't hurt to have a name on there. I mean, I know some people I put on there, they don't have long for this world, but might as well just give them an extra shout out. That's it.
so let's take a look at some of the sources. Yeah. So we're going to look at a couple of things. Do a screen share. So if you've studied with us before and know, what we're looking at right now is a tshuva, which is a legal position paper from the conservative movement called the CJLS, the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards. As you can see, this one is from May 18th, 2023. Again, not a contested one. You can see that all the rabbis voted, and there were 19 yeses in favor of what the position that they decided on, and only one abstention. So when we look at the driving question and the question of electric cars in 2 weeks, you'll see it's very different. There, it's much more contested and a discussion. And you see many rabbis voting against, many rabbis vote abstaining, and even some rabbis writing position papers afterwards why they voted a certain way. This one was a pretty easy question. So you can see the tshuva begins, it's from rabbis Daniel Graber and Micah Peltz. They're contemporary rabbis that are around my age. Micah was actually an intern here at B'nai Yeshurun about 18 years ago, and he is in Cherry Hill, New Jersey at TBS. I think Daniel Graber is in North Carolina, but I'm not exactly sure. Right, so they asked the question, right? The presiding question is, when should a person come off the communal prayer list? Then all these other questions that we talked about. And you can see in the introduction, they write that Rabbi Graber's wife was diagnosed with breast cancer and talked about how he recited Mishaberach for her and for how long. And that's where sort of he begins the discussion of it. So we want to actually look at a little bit of sources for a second. So someone want to read to me, we are in Numbers chapter 12, the story of Miriam getting leprosy, or tzorat. Someone want to be a reader?
I can read.
Okay.
As the cloud withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam stricken with snow-white scales. When Aaron turned toward Miriam, he saw that she was stricken with scales. And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, account not to us the sin which we committed in our folly. Let her not be like a stillbirth, which emerges from its mother's womb with half its flesh eaten away." So Moses cried out to Adonai, saying, "O God, pray heal her." But said to Moses, "If her father spat in her face, would she not bear her shame for 7 days? Let her be shut out of camp for 7 days, and then let her be readmitted." So Miriam was shut out of camp 7 days, and the people did not march on until Miriam was readmitted.
Okay, what's happening here? And how is this at all potentially relevant to our discussion of Mishaberach?
Well, we're dealing with somebody, the perception was that she was punished with this for some egregious act that she committed. So it was largely her own doing.
Yeah. I was more focused on the fact that Moses saw that his sister had an illness. And what did Moses do?
It was very perfunctory.
I don't know. He prayed. It says, El Narafanala. Moses prayed to God for her healing. I'm not going to read in, there's subtext and there's, if you understand it more, there's potential lashon hara and all these other sort of things surrounding the story. But I'm looking at the very surface level. Moses' sister was sick. Moses prayed to God to heal her, and she was healed. Yeah, Ron?
I wasn't raising my hand, I was scratching my
Sorry,
head.
the other Ron. Other Ron.
As usual, I'm going to go off the subject a little bit, but that's the brevity of El Na'Rafa Na'La and how we embellish all our prayers to go on for hours instead of saying something quickly and being done with it.
Yes. We're actually, that's the fifth thing that we're going to talk about if we have the time, which is a concept called Tircha de Tzibora, which translates to an overwhelming burden upon the community. And that is that services shouldn't be too long. 100%. There's a lot of writing about it. And in preparing for this, one of the questions is, how long do you wait to repeat the Amidah when people are still davening themselves? And a lot of the people already done. Who do you wait for? And how long do you wait before you move on with the service? And there are many things the goal is that you shouldn't put an overwhelming burden to lengthen a service. So yeah, you are onto something, Ron, right? Here in this thing, it's not an expanded, extended Mishra Berach, right? Moses isn't saying heal her skin, give her good spirits, right? Let her not feel alone, right? He's just saying heal her. Short and simple. Nelson?
My take of it is that maybe some illnesses are good, at least for a little bit. And maybe we're too quick to try and make someone well. Maybe they would benefit a little bit from a little illness. And I think sometimes I feel that way about people who get too many vaccinations.
Now we're not going to get political at this moment.
No, but I don't know. It's just a
not going to
question.
get political at this moment.
It's a question.
What we're going to say is, okay, let's look at a second example. Maybe that will flush it out a little bit more and maybe a little bit clearer. It is right. Ooh, where did it go? Hold on. I lost my Safari. Hold on 1 second. It works. There we go. Oh, sorry about that. Here we go. This is what I wanted. Okay. We are in Genesis chapter 20. Abraham and Sarah, if you can see the top, go to Gerar. Abraham, if you remember the story, lies and says that Sarah is his sister, not his wife, because he feels like they're going to kill him in order to take Sarah as a wife. And King Avimelech of Gerar has Sarah brought to him. God visits the king in a dream and tells him he will die because Sarah is actually a married woman. Avimelech is forgiven, but he gets sick. And then the Torah says this, Vayitpalel Avraham el ha-Elohim vayirpa Elohim et Avimelech. Abraham prayed to God, and God heals Avimelech and his wife and his female servants so that they bore children, right? That one of the punishments or one of the illnesses that happened to the women in Avimelech's court was they all became infertile because of this issue. That's how the story goes. Right? The Lord had closed fast every room of the household of Avimelech because of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. So what happens here? Is this the same example? Is there an expanded, extended Mishra Berach, Ron Fursky?
Well, here it just says he prayed to God. It doesn't say what he said.
Yeah, it doesn't.
We don't know if it was 2 words or if it was an hour and a half.
Right, we don't know.
We really don't know.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is he prayed for Avimelech and his family. He didn't pray for Sarah at the same time, who was also barren.
Exactly. Yeah. But then if you want to read, the rabbis have this interesting thing, which is the section it's the next indent. The section is juxtaposed to teach you that whoever prays for mercy on behalf of another, when that person themselves is also in need of the very thing which they pray for, then they will first receive a favorable response from God for themselves. If you're not confused, this actually answers Ron's question, which is if you pray for another and you're dealing with an issue, then your prayer will potentially even be answered first. It could be a little self-serving at some point, right? To say, I'm dealing with Surah, so I'm going to pray for you when I know I'm going to get healed as a result of it. right? I scratch your back, you scratch mine. I'm not really sure. It's an interesting thing. So why I brought this to you, and this is actually the example that they bring in the tshuva from that we're looking at, is there's a prayer for healing, and healing happens. Does this always happen? Has
No.
every single person that you've prayed for healing been healed?
No.
All right, obviously we're dealing with a different reality, right? This is the reality that's presenting to us in the Tanakh, right? But no, we don't always have the same outcome. So how do we know that we're supposed to do this prayer? And if we take a look, someone want to read? This is now, we're in the Shulchan Aruch. We are in the legal code from the 1500s. Someone want to read this?
I can read.
Okay, thanks.
One must not visit the sick during the first 3 hours of the day, for every invalid's illness is alleviated in the morning, and one will not trouble himself to pray, to ask for mercy for him, and not during the last 3 hours of the day, for then his illness grows worse, and one will give up hope to pray for him. This is not a prohibition, but only general advice. Hence, people are not particular with respect to this requirement. One who visited a sick person and did not pray for him has not fulfilled the religious duty of visiting the sick.
Okay, what do you guys take from this?
Well, if you take these other strictures as prohibitions, then you're not fulfilling what you're really supposed to do and finding excuses, to skip mornings and evenings.
It's interesting because there's two things. The most important thing is the thing that I bolded, which is the Shulchan Aruch says, and this in particular is Moses Israelis, the Ramah, the Ashkenazi, the Sicer, who says doing a sick visit is only a sick visit if you actually do a prayer for healing. It's not just spending time with the person. It's not just checking in with the person, but praying for the person, right? So that is part of Bikur Cholim, which is really interesting because you don't think about that, right? Right? I know I'm a rabbi, so when I visit someone, I always, before I leave, I say, can I give you a prayer? But I'm not sure that each one of you, when you go to visit somebody, you say, can I give you a prayer? Right? Or maybe it's what we talked about. It's say, can I bring your name to the synagogue to say prayer for healing? Right. This other thing, which is interesting, which is the first thing is like when you come in the morning, again, this is not like, this is very generalized, right? In the morning, someone who's sick feels better, right? You're not going to want to pray for them because they look like they're fine. Right? You don't think they're that sick, so you're not going to pray, right? And it says if you come late at night when they've had a long day and they're exhausted and they're in a lot of pain, right? You're not going to pray for them because you don't even know if they're going to make it the next day, right? So what I take this as, and this is actually, as someone who does Bikur Cholim for a living, someone who visits the sick for a living, right? It's always about trying to visit someone when you think you're going to get a good time to visit, right? When you think you will when they need the visit, when you raise their spirits, and when they're not too much in pain or too tired. So that's what I take from this is like, what's the ideal time to visit a person? Nelson, and then we'll actually move on. Yeah.
I guess I'm too cynical. Most hospitals, in my experience, they're really busy in the morning. They don't want you to come and visit. And I'm wondering, is that because really people look better and they're more hopeful?
I think it's just because that's when the doctor's around. Yeah. And you got to get everybody gets washed up, gets their meds and all that stuff. I think that's why.
But I assume it's the same kind of problem at people's homes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Why do we pray for, do you know when we do Mishaberach, when we do prayer for healing, do we pray in our mother's name or our father's name?
Mother's name.
Mother.
All right, so this is the source. It's from the Gemara. It's from Masechet Shabbat in the Talmud. Someone want to read it?
The Gemara cites additional statements said by Abaya in the name of the woman who raised him with regard to remedies.
So let me
Abaya-
just pause for a second. What we're, because this is like two sentences taken out of context. This page of the Talmud is this Rabbi Abaye who keeps giving all the like medicinal advice that his mother gave him growing up. But all these, this is like my grandmother would say, when you get a fever, this is, you should have tea with lemon, like that type of stuff. He's going through all the things that his mother told him, right, that helps heal you. Okay, all these home remedies. All right, go ahead.
Abaye said, Mother said to me, all incantations that are repeated are intoned using the name of the mother of the one requiring the incantation, and all knots tied for the purpose of healing are tied on the left.
Again, this is like some sort of superstitious thing for healing, but it's interesting. Like, why do Jews pray using their mother's name? Because that's what Abaye's mother told him. That's what this Rabbi is a fairly famous rabbi in the Talmud. His mother said you pray using your mother's name, right? What's the other reason why?
He's the one who gave you life. I thought that was the reason.
Okay, one gave you life. Okay, I'll show you what the tshuva says. We're sort of jumping around, but here we go. See this paragraph, though not required? Though not required, it's a widespread custom to say the name of the person who is ill. When saying Mishaberach, most commonly we use the person's name with his mother's name. So if the chola, the sick person, is named Yaakov and his mother's name is Rivka, we'd pray Yaakov ben Rivka. Using the mother's name for Mishaberach is based on a situation described in the Talmud. That's what we just looked at. Commentaries offer many reasons, many of which have to do with associating motherhood with mercy and healing. According to Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, one does not know one mother's name. One may use their father's name instead. In our egalitarian context, as conservative Jews, using both parents' names is preferred.
Oh, we got everybody in on the act.
Yeah, take all accounts. Right, what do we usually do? We
The
still
mother's
usually do
name.
mother's name. Yeah, even though this tshuva, which was passed 4, 5, 6 months ago, right, says that the preference is to do father and mother. But they're not really voting on this thing. Okay. Comments, thoughts? We're making our way. Okay, so this is who should be praying, who should be worth praying for? That's the next question that they ask. So when in our prayers, do you know that there are 2 times where we pray for healing?
One of them, I think, is during the Amida, during the
Right.
Shemona Esrei.
Right, the 8th prayer of the Shemona Esrei, it's actually at the end of this tshuva, I'll show you. There is an addition, this is this insertion into the Refu Abracha. There's a blessing which is Refa'enu Hashem, that God should bring healing, that you can add this 4-liner, where you can see a blank space. You can add within the Amidah, which is our devotional prayer, you can add a specific personal prayer for healing for a specific person. So this is option 1. Do you think that you need consent for this private personal prayer you're doing with God from the sick person?
I wouldn't think so.
Yeah, right, you don't, right? But this is where the rabbis are going to say you need consent from a person if we're talking about in a public prayer aspect. So this is what they say about it. Here. But when it comes to communal prayer, the situation becomes more complicated. If a patient does not define themselves as ill and we include them on communal prayer lists, we're denying our person agency in how they define themselves within the community and risk embarrassing them publicly, a sin the rabbis equated to the shedding of blood. Have you heard that before? That if you embarrass someone, it's as if you are committing murder? Right? Some people want to be very private about their illness, and we may or may not know that, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. By the way, they say here later, there's one situation where you don't have to ask for consent, and that is if it's a public figure, right? If it's on the news that this person is sick, and sometimes every once in a while, maybe in the Mishaberic list, somebody puts like a sports figure who was injured, got injured playing a game, or, a celebrity or something that happened, right? And we just say the name. And sometimes we laugh during services when it happens, right? I say like a Browns player or something. But, actually the tshuva says, right, for a public figure, you can add their name. You don't have to ask them. Yeah, Nelson?
From the stories people have been telling about how others feel when they tell them they would like to pray for them, it seems to me you should tell people that you're going to put their name at least in the private prayer, because it would be helpful to them, maybe help them get well.
Yeah. Well, that's actually something that, that's the tshuva doesn't talk about this, and we've talked about it before over time, that research shows that if a person knows that they're being prayed for, it actually has efficacy. A person is more likely to be healed because they feel that positivity and they feel community and connection. And it actually has a more positive outcome. Obviously, it doesn't always work, but in all
It
these
lifts the
data,
spirits.
I'm sorry?
It lifts the spirits.
Yeah, even more than lifting their spirits, right? They feel more confident about the treatment they're doing, and that some confidence, they either stay more on course, it maybe forces them to actually be more actively engaged in doing the work necessary or taking the pills regularly or doing the rehab more consistently, or it might even have some mental, emotional thing that actually works on their improvement. Okay, what about someone who is not going to improve? We talked about this, right? This is what they discern as the terminally ill. Someone want to read this indented thing, which is Mishnah. It's from Mishnah Brachot, chapter 9, the tractate about blessings, chapter 9. Someone want to read this citation?
I guess I'll read that. I'm the one who brought this up. And one who cries out over the past in an attempt to change that which has already occurred, it is a vain prayer. One whose wife was pregnant and says, "May it be God's will that my wife gives birth to a boy," this is a vain prayer. One who was walking on the path home and heard the sound of a scream in the city and says, "May it be God's will that this is not from my house," this is a vain prayer.
Okay. You may have heard these examples before. I mean, these are prayers you can imagine people saying, right? Correct?
Correct.
Hear that there is an accident in a place where your friends or family lives, right? Right? Like, yes, you say, please God, let X, Y, or Z not have been hurt in it, correct?
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
right? And the rabbis here in the Talmud says that is an inappropriate prayer. Tfilat shav, a false, vain prayer, because it's already happened, right? Whoever got hurt, right? You're not gonna change what happened. Same thing with the gender of a fetus, right? Right? The fetus's gender has already been determined, right? Right? So, don't pray for a boy or a girl. Again, the rabbis are saying this, right? But of course, these are things that we do. It's natural, right? So do you think that this has any connection? They're making a connection, Rabbi Graber and Rabbi Peltz, to this question of a terminally ill patient. And should we be praying for healing for someone? I know Nelson said, right, that, you never know, right? And I've heard story. In fact, I've seen people that were literally on their deathbed from our own shul that, thank God, were able to turn around and will literally walk out of the hospital, right? So I definitely know it happens, right? But what happens when all the medical experts say no? And I'll give you this commentary now from the bottom. Erica, if you'll read. Now, this is Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who makes a comment on this.
Okay. It says, our master counseled not to increase public communal prayer, etc., where the doctors already abandoned hope of healing the ill person naturally, even when it was a great figure. If the prayers would not be answered, the patient would not be healed. There is concern, God forbid, for weakness of faith. And he instructed those who asked that in such cases they should pray that he help the patient and help his family, and that they not ask for healing specifically, and God will do that which is good in his eyes.
All right, what do you think? What do you think? Are you sold? What's the reason, Rabbi, if you know, Rabbi Shlomo Auerbach is a very respected Orthodox rabbi. What's the reason he says here that for a terminally ill patient, you should not say Mishperach?
Well, there's a reference here to helping his family. So in the situation that I described and you're describing, in a terminal situation, last days kind of thing, which is what I was talking about.
Yeah.
We had a whole family was there. There were, immediate family and then cousins and everybody. So it's those people that maybe we're thinking about as well.
Yeah.
Now, the point I brought up is that she be, not feel pain. I'm not sure if this applies in this situation, but it could.
Yeah, well, and that's basically, so right, Rabbi Auerbach here says you should reframe, right? You should reword the prayer, right? If you caught what he said, he is saying here, right, if there's a high percentage chance this person is not going to survive, and you pray for healing and the person doesn't survive, you don't want others to lose faith and others not to pray for healing in other cases, right? Right, that's what he's saying. That's one of his fears, is he doesn't want other people to stop losing faith that people will be healed in other cases, less severe, and that people will not be saying Mishaberachs in less severe cases. Right, so, but then
Excuse me, how does this play?
Yeah,
How does
go
this
ahead,
play?
Rob. Yeah.
How does this play into where they change a person's name?
They don't address that here, but yeah, what Ron is saying, if you know, oftentimes in cases where someone is very seriously ill, right, we add an extra Hebrew name, we change their name, oftentimes with a name like Chaim, life, or Raphael, right, healer of God, or some variant of either of those names, for two reasons. One is to add life to the name, but what's the second reason?
That they'll forget that person that's ill and use a different name.
Yeah. You sort of trick the angel of death, or right, that this isn't that person that you were coming for, right? This is somebody else, right? He'll be okay. Yeah. But
Sorry,
yeah,
wrong
that is
bed.
definitely a tradition, and we've done it in our own shul for people who are very sick, and that naming ceremony, that renaming ceremony, was an opportunity for them to begin, God willing, a sense of renewal and return.
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yeah.
Did you ever see it work, the changing of the name?
Yeah.
Because I haven't.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. You know, I'm involved in this a lot, right? So I have seen it go both ways.
But another thing, I don't think we should stop praying just because some doctors decided that this patient
Right.
is
And
too
that's
much.
what Nelson said. And by the way, after I was going to get to, now this is, if you look at the thing after what Eric said, right, then these rabbis who wrote the tshuva see this. While saying a mishaberach for someone with a terminal illness, I lost my sheet. I got too many sheets here. Eric, you can read it.
All right, do you want the indentation or
Yeah, while
what's
saying a
indented?
mishaberach.
Oh,
Yeah.
while saying a Misha Berak for someone with a terminal illness is not a Tifla Shav, it can come with risks. Prayer like the one Rabbi Arbach suggested, or similar prayers of support for the patient and family would also be appropriate.
Okay, we'll stop here. Right, so they say, okay, we presented it potentially as Tfilat Shav, as a vain prayer, a prayer that shouldn't be said, but really you can still say Misha Berach, even for someone who the doctors have given up hope on, right? It's okay to say, but maybe you should restate it, like Rabbi Auerbach or Eric, like your example, and their examples if we look at towards the end of this tshuva. So now I want to jump to this question of when should someone come off the list? So look at this things. Their first line is, the short answer to the question is when a person passes away or they say they want to get off the list. Right, and then it goes through this whole thing like what you should do as a synagogue staff or a volunteer, that you should, how to get on the list, how to get off a list, and should you reset the list every month? By the way, we actually have a thing. If you add a name to our we have a formal Misha Berach list, which is actually on our website, so that anyone that wants to pray for all of our community that we're praying for healing for, Diane Dranzek, my assistant, updates that weekly, and you're actually only on the list for 4 weeks. If someone gives us a name and doesn't give us a specific time period, you're actually only on the list for 4 weeks. You don't sort of stay on permanently. And Diane will actually check in, or one of us potentially will check in at some point if we feel like the name should be on longer, given circumstances. Right, and this actually, they start talking about sort of who we are as a synagogue right now. So Eric, if you will read, this is the question of how long someone stays on.
All right, such an open-ended stance does create problems. The patient must give consent to be listed on our communal list, and once he does so, they should remain on the list until ready to be removed. But the community has rights too. In some communities, rabbis and gavaim are handed a list of names to read as 40, 50, or 60 names or more. We see that. Such a list takes a significant amount of time to read, such that it becomes a tirchat tzibura, a burden upon the community. One of the primary sources for the concept of tirchat tzibura is a Mishnah in Yoma 68b, where we learn that the high priest read 2 sections from the Sefer Torah, one from Acharemot and the other from Emor, at which a 3rd section from Parshat Pinchas was read by heart. The Torah was not rolled to the relevant location in Pinchas because of the honor of the congregation.
Right, because it would take too long to roll the Torah from one spot to another during services, so they decided not to read the 3rd one, or someone read it from heart by memory, because they didn't want to burden the people with just sitting there for 5 minutes while they found the correct place. Keep going.
Okay, Rashi explains it there that the concern was on account of the congregation's honor, the Levites have to wait in passive silence while the Torah is being rolled. Rambam in Laws of Prayer rules that a Sefer Torah must not be rolled during prayers in order to avoid tirha d'tzibura. In our case, at the scroll, a community passively.
Oh, sorry.
Where was it? Okay, passively listening to the longest of names being read can be considered a tirha d'tzibura and therefore avoided.
Okay, what do you think?
Well, don't we do that on Mondays and Thursdays? It's a long list.
And Shabbat.
And Shabbat.
Yeah, so I will tell you right now, we're giving you my personal heart to heart. This is something that I've been thinking about. I've been talking to many people about. We've been talking with clergy, talking with Gabayim, right? Should we maintain our practice on Shabbat and on Mondays or Thursdays of reading these long lists? Should it be only the people that are present? Should we just have that printed list on the website and people can scan it themselves? Or on Shabbat, right, we're only doing the people that are there, is it, they're coming, people are coming, including some of you, right? Some people are specifically coming this is their entire purpose of coming to shul, is to bring a name for healing with our community, right? And they feel, again, like we talked about before, we feel like we are bringing healing to a person. We didn't say this also. This is the third piece. When you visit someone who's sick or you say a prayer for them, that we actually believe that you relieve 1/60th of their illness. Again, this is that idea of efficacy of this. So I don't want to deny someone who's coming to synagogue that ability, that opportunity to bring that loved one's name for healing, and not just to have them have a private moment within a 2.5 to 3 hour service, but then it adds another 5 to 10 minutes to the service. So this is that balance of tircha d'tzibura, right? What is it, a burden on the community, or is it actually a beautiful thing for the community? And we can have patience for this because it allows everyone to feel participatory and that they are literally doing a mitzvah. So that's why we sort of do what we do currently and haven't sort of changed things. Comments, thoughts, reactions?
Can I say something about it?
Yes, please.
There were many studies done about this type of things. They found out that the people who didn't have anybody that prayed for them were like sort of forgotten in a way, and they died faster than the people who, and this is coming from totally people who are not religious, okay? They found out that people that were prayed for and they had more chances, they got better for some reason. We don't know why.
And that's what I was talking about before, that there is some efficacy of prayer that, right, they've studied people who are prayed for, people who were told that they were prayed for, and they definitely, they healed more.
That's why, even though I'm a physician and scientifically oriented, my list is a long list for Mi Sheberach.
Yeah. Other comments, thoughts?
There is something beyond all of this, and that is that sometimes when a name is put on the list, people in the congregation see it and then ask what's happening. That's happened a number of times.
Yes.
For me, actually, in this congregation, that I put a name up there, and some people said, "What's happening?" So that it actually has a benefit there, and also the fact you hear the rabbi or whoever's leading the service read the name out loud, and you hear it. That's a really important thing.
So are you, just to clarify, Eric, are you saying when you hear a name, that you're surprised and it means that you're going to reach out and see how
Yep.
they're doing and assist them. Is that what you're saying?
Then I would reach out to the person who probably put the name up and say, how is this person doing? What's happening? That kind of thing. So it actually raises some awareness, which also is a good, it helps. It's happened to me a few times. That's why I mentioned it.
Definitely, I agree with Eric.
Other comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I personally don't mind the extra 5 or 10 minutes. I think that's a beautiful thing.
I'd like to go back and ask a question when you're done with this subject.
Sure.
Well, nothing's coming up, so let's go back to when you name the person and questionable whether you use the father or the mother.
Yeah.
And if you don't know the father or the mother's name, or the person itself knows its Hebrew name, but not the parent's Hebrew name, but you know the English name, do you say Abraham or Sarah, or do you use the English name?
That's a great question, right? So, right, we're all children of Abraham and Sarah if we're Jewish, right? So do we just do sort of the generic, or do we do their actual English parents' names? Correct? That's what you're asking, right, Ren?
That's the question.
Yeah, I have an answer, but let's see what everybody else has. Thoughts?
I think if you don't know the person's Hebrew name, you say it, you use the English name.
English, and not just Sarah, not just generic.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But about the list that we have, if there was a way to eliminate repetition, because we hear
I know
many
that
times.
was my goal with the WhatsApp group, is that you could see whatever other people put on, but yeah, it hasn't happened.
The reason I asked the question is because Jan and I disagree. He says you use Abraham and Sarah, and I say you use the English name.
Yeah, I would use the English name because that's the most correct name. And again, there's this idea both from Eric saying that like perhaps it's going to acknowledge within the community, so that people can reach out, and also that's the specific person. And there's actually a text that says that you can do the entire prayer in English. I won't look at it, but the Shulchan Aruch actually says that it's okay to pray in a language that people understand for healing, and it doesn't have to be Hebrew. So I would potentially expand that to their name also.
But we can say prayers also for non-Jewish people who don't have a Jewish name.
Whoa, I've been visiting with one of our maintenance staff's been in the hospital last 2 weeks. Visit him, and I sang prayers for healing for him. Yeah, he's on our list too, of course.
Well, I've done that many times.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so let's look at the psak. Let's look at what the actual, what their conclusion is, and then I want to show you a couple more things, and we'll call it a day. And then in 2 weeks, more controversial topic, which is, are you allowed to? Does the conservative movement say it's okay to not just drive a car on Shabbat, but like what type of car and other things? Okay, so I'm going to screen share again. So just to quickly go through every tshuva actually has an answer, and this is what they actually voted on. They voted on what the answer was, and then all the pages before is the logic that provided it. So number 1, individuals recovering from illness can consider themselves healthy and therefore no longer in need of prayers of healing. Nevertheless, we should include whoever asks us in our prayers, and individually we may pray for whoever we think needs healing. Meaning, like, if we don't really think the person is sick, but they're asking you to pray for them, we take people at their word. We skip that part, but that was like another part of this tshuva is like, how do you actually determine if someone's sick? And there, which we didn't look at, they actually use the reasoning for when you're not, when you can override the Yom Kippur fast. And there's the intricate laws of who fasts on Yom Kippur. And actually, in the end, it says you follow medical advice And if the individual person feels that they are not healthy enough to fast, then you shouldn't fast. So they're applying that same logic here, saying if the person wants a prayer for healing, if they feel like they need a prayer for healing, that's good enough. Okay, they can have a prayer for healing, even if we might think that they are healthy. Okay, number 2, a person must give consent to be included in communal list for Mishaberach. That consent must include whether that person's name is said in Hebrew or English and their relationship to a member of the congregation. If the sick person is unable to give consent, then it may be granted by a loved one or trusted friend. Otherwise, the privacy of a person must be respected and the name not recited aloud. 3, it's appropriate to include those with chronic or mental illness with Mishaberach prayers. Prayers that have been composed for these or other specific illnesses may also be used. And that's, we'll see, I don't think we'll have time, but the appendix of this actually gives other variations of Mishaberachs that are more either for like that case of a terminal illness, emotional and mental health issues. One may recite a Mishaberach for one who is terminally ill, but might be advisable based on the situation instead to pray for that person and their family's needs. That was what we talked about. And last time, a community should determine a fixed time to reset their communal list. That's what we say. We have like a 4-week window that you're on, or else otherwise we check in. So you're on, yeah. First key.
That number 2, does
Yeah.
that have some impact because of HIPAA laws?
Yeah, they didn't actually talk about.
They didn't
HIPAA.
say that.
HIPAA doesn't apply to us because we're not medical professionals, but I'm sure it's based on HIPAA didn't help. You know, we definitely have HIPAA on the mind. Yeah.
I mean, not that you're saying what's wrong with anybody, but even the fact that they're sick they may not want people to know.
Yeah. Yeah. We are not bound by HIPAA, but that definitely impedes on it. And by the way, that impedes on us too about knowing people that are sick. When I started, you know, now I feel old, 22 years ago, I literally could visit any hospital, and with my business card, they would give me the census for the hospital. I could literally look through a paper listing of every individual that was in the hospital that day and see if there's a member of the shul there, and oftentimes they were labeled by religion. That stopped with HIPAA. That was pre-HIPAA, right? So now I can't. Now I don't know if anybody's in the hospital unless we are notified. Yeah. All right, well, thank you for studying with me. Again, this is not such a controversial issue. We're going to get a little bit more controversial. Wanted to start with a little slower thing, but it's actually something, this question of how to deal with Mishaberach list for our community is something that we've been talking a lot about because, again, it's this balance of want to make sure that we're not burdening the community with a prayer service and turn people off. We want to have an engaging prayer service and not where people are bored or not feeling connected. But also, obviously, we care about the health, literally the health of our community and all those connected to our community. So thank you for learning with me, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.